So today I kind of want to go over the topic of hardware for space games like Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen. And when I say hardware, I'm talking about like joysticks, throttles, pedals, controllers, keyboards, and mouse, and different options that you could use to play Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous or other similar games, and what would be best for you. I'm just going to kind of do a brief overview of the topics and options that you have. And now, if you're like me and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to get this hardware, I'm going to be the best pilot ever, I'm going to go be the hero to all the new players getting blown up in Sidewinders by trolls and stuff. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works. I could go out and I could buy the top end hardware right now, and it's just not going to. It's just not going to make me that. It's not really going to improve my ability to fly a spaceship much, if at all. Now there's benefits here and there from buying new hardware, and I'll kind of go over those later on. But like honestly, the biggest improvement that you'll get is if you're playing with stuff like joysticks or mouse and keyboard. If you're just playing the way that you enjoy the game most, so you get the most seat time, which will translate into you being a better pilot. And just kind of for an example of this, like I run dual stick right now, and it's probably my favorite setup I've played with. But there's still people out there that play with a controller that would absolutely destroy me if we did combat. Now I'll kind of go over the hardware that I've used in my time playing these space games. I started off with mouse and keyboard, like I'm sure most people did. Then I switched to an Xbox 360 controller. Then I went to an X52 Hotas. And then, kind of weird, I found an X56 joystick for sale by someone who had bought an X56 Hotas, and then the original one, the throttle was messed up, and Logitech just sent him a whole new setup, so he ended up selling me his joystick, which was good because my joystick was broke at the time. And then later on, I got a Virpil left-hand joystick, and I also have BKB rudder pedals. Now, some of the stuff that my friends have used and I have in direct experience with is the Thrustmaster Warthog T1600s and the Thrustmaster T Flight Hotas. That's the one that you can use with PlayStation and Xbox as well as PC. Now, if you're new to the genre, there's a ton of options, and it seems like everybody has their own opinion on what's best or what they like, and they're going to try and sell it to you as what's best. So how do you pick your option, or how do you pick the best option for you? Well, like I said before, it's what option you enjoy flying with best. So I'm going to do a little overview so you can figure that out, so you don't end up spending tons of money on something that you don't enjoy flying with. Now I'll just kind of go over the pros and cons of each setup real quick. So keyboard and mouse for like aiming fixed weapons, they have a pretty major advantage of doing that, and it's hard to beat that just from a perspective of playing the game. But on the con side, they don't have analog control over the ship, so like some of your movements might be choppy. Like if you're thrusting forward, you're just going to get full thrust all the time. If you're rolling, you're going to get full roll. You don't have partial any of that, and etc. for basically everything on the ship. But the con that made me move away from mouse and keyboard is I just didn't enjoy flying like that much. So eventually I grabbed the old Xbox 360 controller and plugged it in and started playing with that. Now the controllers, you do get that analog movement, and I think it's kind of one of the most chill ways to play the game. Like, there's no other way that you can play the game and set it up on your big screen and kick back on a couch and play. So I think that's a major advantage for the controller. The setup for like the button bindings and how you use it, pretty simple, so you can get right in the game and play. Also, if you're playing on foot as well, you can use a controller for both your on foot gameplay and your ship gameplay, so that has a lot of advantages. Now, one con is you can't aim it with it as well as mouse, but that's pretty much going to be every single other option besides mouse and keyboard. You're not going to be able to aim as well as you could with a mouse. Another disadvantage, and why I eventually moved away from controller personally, is because I just didn't have the amount of buttons I wanted to bind everything in the game. So my next one was the X52 Hotas, and honestly I like this setup a lot, and if I bought one used, so it was a little bit broken at first, so it always yawed left. But honestly, it was great, and that's really kind of when I fell in love with space games. Now, I probably never would have moved away from this if it didn't like completely like basically everything stopped working on it after several years on my used Hotas. Now, the advantage to this, for a Hotas, everything's pretty much like there's a pretty like the so-called meta of how you would lay out your controllers and everything. It's pretty cut and dry, so it's still an easy setup, so you can be in the game flying your ship pretty fast. Now you do lack the aim ability that you would get with a mouse, and you don't have quite as much control over your ship as you would with dual sticks. Now, the dual stick setup, it gives you tons of control over your ship, so you can really do more complex, well, I don't know about more complex, but you can easily kind of do flight assist or decoupled a lot better. But the disadvantage of it is if you're not in combat or racing or hooning around planets or anything like that, you're going to kind of, like, it's not nearly as chill as like just using a Hotas with a throttle. I think that way to control your ship's a lot easier in situations where you're mining or trade hauling. So kind of a little disadvantage, but for just flying your ship, I think this is one of the most fun ways to fly your ship around. Now I'm going to do kind of a brief overview of all the throttles, joysticks I've had direct or indirect experience with. So I'm going to start this off with the Thrustmaster T Flight Hotas. I think it's the cheapest option that you can get to get a Hotas. I have a couple buddies that used it, and they all liked it. I had one buddy who kind of broke a little bit, but it was still usable, so there's that. So you kind of get what you pay for, but at the same time, it's still a great option for getting into the game. Now, the X52 Logitech, I bought mine used, and like I said before, it came a little bit broken, so that it left all the time, which was kind of a little bit frustrating, but with some dead zones I fixed it, and I used it for a total of 3 to 4 years. My joystick did go out before the throttle kind of started failing on me, but it was a good setup and I liked it a lot. Now the T1600, I've had buddies that have used it both dual stick and stick and throttle, and they've had nothing but good stuff to say about it. The only thing is, I think they kind of talked about it being a little bit plasticky, but it's held up, and I don't think they've had any issues with it at all. Now the X56 Logitech I've never used the throttle, like I said earlier. I just bought the stick, and honestly, it's the stick I use for my right hand to this day still, and I've had zero problems with it, and I've enjoyed it a lot. It's a good stick. It is pretty big, so if you have smaller hands, you might want to consider something else, because I have pretty good sized hands, and it's still a little bit big for me. Now, the Thrustmaster Warthog, my buddy bought one of these, and it was fairly expensive, and he loved like the metal fill and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, for space games, he ended up switching to something cheaper with yaw on the stick. So I'm not sure if I can recommend it for the price, but I do know a lot of people who use it and like it. Now the Virpil products, I only have a left joystick from them, and it's pretty much a no compromise stick, but honestly it's overkill. So if you got quite a bit of money and you don't mind putting it towards a Virpil, then like I don't think you can go wrong with it. But honestly, I don't think it's necessary at all to play the game or anything like that. But it is a good product, good quality, has more buttons than you can know what to do with. But anyway, there's one last brand that I've only used the rudder paddles from VKB, but I've only heard good stuff about their joysticks. So anyway, if you found any of this making you want to buy a joystick, I would recommend you do more research on it. And if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching the video. Have a good one.